Welcome to Play Theory. Now, before this gets going, I just kind of want to explain what this is. Play theory is going to be about toys and object manipulation, whatever you want to call it. I kind of boil it down to play. It's all the same thing to me. It's just that everybody shares this passion to play with stuff, whether it be a yo-yo, Astrojax, poi, fingerboarding, Beglieri, Halo, you name it. It's all the same thing. It's all playing. So this show is kind of going to be like edited randomly. There's different segments throughout it, and every bit of it is a little bit different. So the idea is that I want this to be community based. So I've compiled everything into episode 1. I want episode 2 to be based on viewer feedback. And I'm going to go over this more at the end of the video. So with that all being said, okay, so I'm going to go through a couple basic things that you can learn with Astrojax that'll get you going. So Astrojax is one of those toys where there's not really a start or stop. Like with the yo-yo, you throw it down, you bind it back, or kendama, you land it, and you have like stationary holds or mounts. So one of the first things you want to learn is just the horizontal orbit. So what you're going to want to do is take the middle ball, put it about halfway down, and start spinning the bottom ball. And when the bottom ball gets right here, gets near this hand, you're gonna throw this ball towards yourself. So right when it goes under here, you toss it towards yourself. And this is a horizontal orbit. And you don't really have to move your hand, but if you want it to just keep going forever, doing small circles helps. Now once you get the hang of this, starting to bounce it up and down is going to change it into a vertical orbit. So horizontal orbits are all about the circular motion, and vertical orbits are about the up and down. So you're going to want to practice doing horizontal orbits first and slowly learning to bounce it. It takes very, very slight bouncing motions. You don't have to bounce your hand up and down, because when you do that, it's going to be a little bit more erratic. So it's very, very small, subtle motions. Another way you can get into a horizontal orbit is by holding each end balls and spinning the middle ball and having it sit like this, and then just letting go. So you spin that middle ball and then you just let go. And this will get you into a horizontal orbit. So once you're comfortable with being in horizontal orbit and you start to learn to get into vertical orbits, what you want to do is keep it from spinning in all these directions, and you want to keep it flat in front of you. So that just takes a lot of practice. There's no real tips or tricks with that other than feeling it out and learning how to get into the vertical orbit, and you can learn to keep it stationary. Now at first you might have trouble and it might be doing this and spinning in circles, so you just need to work on having it stay in front of you and flat. This is wall plane. Learning to keep it on wall plane will help a lot. One way to just get straight into vertical orbits is to hold each end ball in each hand. And I'm right-handed, so I'm going to keep this one held. Do not let go of your right hand. And I'm going to toss this ball over. And this is a good way to just drop right into vertical orbits. So once you get the hang of vertical orbits and you can keep it still in front of you, what you're going to do is you're going to pull it twice as hard as you normally are, and it'll go up in the air like that. When it goes up in the air, you want to stick your wrist in between it. So you're in a vertical orbit, you pull twice as hard and let it rest on your wrist. From this point, you're just going to flop this middle ball up and over your hand, and you'll fall right back into vertical orbits. So pull twice as hard, land on wrist, flop it over. And when you get the hang of this, you can do it all in one fluid motion. And this is what we call the wrist flip. And once you get the hang of a wrist flip, you can do it continuously. Your goal with Astrojax should be to get into this mount and be comfortable with it. So that wrist flip I was just doing, if you're holding it like this and you spin that end ball in your hand, and when you stick your finger out, it hits right here. Now it's gonna make a 7 shape. Right when it does that 7 shape, you want to throw this ball up and over your hand. And you'll drop into a vertical orbit. What this is a controlled wrist flip. Once you get the hang of that, when you do the wrist flip, you can grab that middle ball again. Now, if your vertical orbits are going the opposite way, you can still do wrist flips. You just have to do them backwards. And when you catch it into the basic mount, it's a little bit different. Now from this hold, you can do various rebounds. You can go past your hand and hit your other wrist. And this is just a super basic rebound, and you can translate it pretty much anywhere on your body if you want. Another easy rebound trick is to hold each end ball and bounce the sliding ball back and forth. And the same principle applies where you can go past your wrist. And once you learn these, you can also use your body too. You can also go below and do rebounds on the bottom. So with these basic moves, you can go into horizontal orbits to vertical orbits, wrist flip, and then learn controlled wrist flips. And this is one of the best ways to get into the more advanced styles of astrojacksing. From here, you can learn how to do a lot of different tricks. So with these simple steps, you can learn to take it from a horizontal orbit to a vertical orbit, learn to keep it still in front of you, do a wrist flip, and then learn to wrist flip to this mount, and then do controlled wrist flips. And this is one of the best ways to get into the advanced styles of Astrojax. Okay, so I kind of just want to give like a rundown on my theory of why some toys are harder to learn than other toys. Now, everybody's different. You might be able to pick up any of these toys. You might be able to pick up any toy and just dominate at it because you have that ability in you to learn quickly. But for other people, they might struggle with learning a new toy. I love playing with all toys, and I've made it a goal in my life to collect pretty much every single thing dealing with object manipulation I possibly can. I'm not saying my theory is foolproof, it's just something to think about. And I think most toys, they have a difficulty level dealing with how many focus points you have to concentrate on. Something like Begliri, when you're playing with it, you're dealing with the grip position and slinging the end around. So as long as you are holding that bead, it's really just one thing you're focusing on. You're focusing on this end bead slinging around. When you do wraps, you're letting go of that grip, which technically there's two things you're focusing on now. But with the way Begliri works is that other bead always falls into a grip. So for a very split second, you have two things to focus on. And this same thing applies to kendama. So when I'm holding the ball and I'm doing a tower and I flip the tower and I catch it again, I'm really only focusing on this piece of the toy. Now, if I flip it in the air and then I decide to flip the ball in my hand and catch it, then I'm letting go, and now I have two things that I have to focus on. So kendama is one of those toys where it doesn't really exceed two focus points. Balisong is kind of similar because when you're flipping it around, you're only focusing on the one end piece. If you were to toss it and grab it, it's still kind of one thing to focus on. Now with something like pen spinning, this is just one object. So when you're spinning it, you're focusing on grips and changing grips. So again, you only have the object and then the grip changes. So you only have about two focal points. Now when you get into yo-yoing, you have the yo-yo that you're focusing on, but then the string itself can be divided into a lot of things. So you could have slack on one side while you're doing a whip on the other. So with the yo-yo using the string, you can get up to 2 to 4 focus points. But if you do something like 5A and add a dice to it, that ups it to about 6, because now you're dealing with the yo-yo and the dice spinning. When you're doing something like spinning poi and you're just doing basic tricks, all you're focusing on is the two heads of the poi. Sometimes you might be using your legs or arms to rebound and wrap, so that adds another focal point. So it could be 2 to 3 things you're focusing on. When you start using handles and you start doing tosses and technical stuff with the handles, then you're going into more focus points. Something like Astrojax can have a ton of focal points. You might be spinning this one around and wrapping it in your hand, while with this one you're about to release an orbit and catch it back. And this means you're doing like several focus points. So I think you can get good with any toy. So I think the harder toys to use are the ones that deal with more things to concentrate on. Something like staff might be easier to start off with because it's just a stick and it just requires you to grab it and spin it. Sometimes you'll roll it on your body, but for the most part you're concentrating on only the stick. If you get into something like double staves, you're concentrating on both of the sticks and the patterns. So I think some toys are harder to learn on that fact alone. There are toys like the yo-yo or spin tops, Diabolo, where you have to learn how to make the toy run before you can play with it. So you have to learn how to throw and stabilize a yo-yo before you can even start playing around and discovering tricks. Same goes for a top and Diabolo. You've got to learn how to make them work before you can start experimenting. So those toys might be a little bit harder to learn than some other toys. Now again, I want to stress that I think that everybody's different, so everybody has different learning curves, so you can pretty much pick up any toy and get used to it. This doesn't apply to everybody, but I do think that certain toys require more concentration points, more focusing on certain areas than others. If you want to just start out into getting into the object manipulation world, maybe consider picking something that doesn't require so many points of concentration. A good way to break down my theory is with juggling 3 balls. I think right off the bat most people would think that you're concentrating on 3 things, but really it's just one thing. Really, when you're juggling 3 balls, there's really only 1 ball in the air, technically. You still have to catch and release, so that means that it's probably 2 things that you're focusing on, because when I throw one up in the air, I have to catch and release the other one. So when you break down 3-ball juggling, I'm only really throwing 1 ball in the air at a time. So again, you're only really focusing on one thing. These are just my thoughts on why some toys are harder than other toys. So basically these are Tri-Thology made of splash balls, and they've been hanging on my shower, but I'm gonna go swimming with my friend. I'm gonna take these and make a little edit. This might be one of the craziest signs I've ever read at a pool. Okay, that was pretty cool. I haven't really used these since I think 2011. When I first moved to California, I had just started making Tri-Thology, and I just was experimenting, and I decided to make one out of splash balls since these were at the 99-cent store. What I discovered today with playing with it is that, like my friend suggested while I was there, the balls, when they hit the water, they rehydrate. And I noticed that when they're in the water, it's almost stationary. So you can throw them and it will anchor into the water. And that was something that was really cool. That's a really awesome discovery. But yeah, it's really unique idea to have, you know, water weight the handles. These have been in my shower for so long, I don't really understand why they shrunk, but that was a really cool experiment. When I was growing up, I really liked playing with toys. So of course, I like Jenga. And I play with these so much that sometimes I gotta clean them up. And that means you gotta knock the tower down. The idea was to hit the bottom of the tower and then catch. I went ahead and tried to do this. It's hard to catch them all in there. This concept really isn't a skill toy, but I think it could be in a really weird way. I don't have the type of box that I want, but imagine if this was made of wood and you put the box upside down and you built the tower on top of the box. So you pick the box up, toss the tower in the air, turn the box over, and catch all of it. That's something I definitely want to try because it seems like a really fun challenge.
So for this move, first it requires a specific setup. I have magnets attaching my handles together, and I've had them attached for a while, but just recently I figured out a move where you can kick them, and if you do it properly, you can split the magnet handles and then catch it. So I'm gonna try that one more time. That was pretty sweet. I almost had it, if only I landed that catch. So after 6 years of using my magnet handles, I finally figured out how to separate them easily. Like, I never take them apart. I have magnets, but I never take them apart. So I finally figured out how to separate them, and all you have to do is kick it hard enough, and they separate just like that. And if you time it correctly, you can then reattach the magnets. So I was super stoked because it was finally a way for me to unattach my magnets after I've been using them attached together for so long. Maybe I'll start spinning 2.0, but most likely not.
So a really long time ago, I saw Astrojax on the TV, and I was really drawn to it. So Astrojax is a toy with 3 balls on a string, and the middle ball slides. But for the longest time, people have usually modded the ends to where multiple balls can slide. And I've had Astrojax for a really long time. And one day, I thought, what if you could connect these strings together? Now there's a lot of tricks in Astrojaxing that you can do where you spin them like this. I had this thought, what if this didn't happen? If you could stop that from happening, it would just infinitely spin. And this is how I thought of Tri-Thology. So Tri-Thology is 3 balls on the string but attached by a swivel, and the swivel keeps it from twisting. Now right when I thought of this toy, I didn't have these materials laying around. I went to the hardware store and I bought the closest thing that I could find to what I needed, which was pulleys. And this design isn't the best because they don't really swivel, but it was enough for me to experiment with. Now, Astrojax, you don't have to connect the string, but with Tri-Thology, you have to connect the string. And I ended up figuring out a way to make it seamless. But the issue with Tri-Thology, and why it's hard for me to make and sell, is that you can't really ever change the string. And as you can see, this string is very used. It's a very old string. I've used this set for years. So I could put a new one on there, but it takes some time and some skills to sew and connect these strings together. Now you're probably wondering, why am I talking about this toy? This has nothing to do with Halo. So sometime around 2016 to 2017, I started thinking of alternative ideas. What if it wasn't string? What if I used chain? Because if I sold a Tri-Thology that was chain, anyone can unlink and link it back together, and it's less likely to break or damage like this string has. So one of my buddies who knew I was trying to experiment with chains handed me a necklace. He said, "Here, play with this." And this is the exact necklace he handed me. So I started slinging it around and playing with it. And I realized, like, this is really fun actually. It's like very Beglieri-like. But what if there was a weight on it? And I looked around my friend's room and I found this washer. So I put the washer on the chain, hooked it all up, and I played with it with the weight on it, and I realized this is a really cool toy. Now this right here, this setup right here is not great, but it was enough to spark my interest in the toy. So when I got home, I went and grabbed the chain that I had and the rings that I had available, and I made some of these. And from here I was able to get a little bit of a smoother play style with it. The original chain that I used was bumpy and made of square pieces, so when I got home that day and I put rings on a chain, it was like a breath of fresh air, and I knew that this toy had to be made. So I went to town making all different versions, all different sizes, different ring types, and I just geeked out for almost a year just playing with these things. And once I knew, that day that I basically thought of Halo, I was hooked. I was obsessed. My friend was talking to me about different stuff, but all I could think about was making this happen. I wanted to make this into something that was real. So with a lot of researching and experimenting with different ring sizes, different chains, and looking for manufacturers, I ended up making the first Halo. And I produced these, and they have a perfect weight ratio between the two. So these are nothing compared to this actual Halo. Once you have an oversized ring and a really hefty chain, then Halo plays amazingly. And since then I've made a lot of different versions of it, and I have more versions coming out later, and I've experimented with a lot of different shapes and sizes, and it's a really fun toy. So really, because of Tri-Thology, Halo came about. The puzzle to fix the string or make this string easier on the customer resulted in a completely new toy. And I understand Halo is a pretty weird idea because it's jewelry, it's a necklace, it's fashion, but it's also object manipulation, dexterity, and skills. So I understand why people might think it's weird. You can play with anything, and if you put enough passion into it, you can take your ideas and turn them into a reality.
Fucking over.
When I say everything is a toy, I mean everything is a toy. Let me demonstrate. Typical bed sheet, right? Wrong. So yeah, this might be weird, but again, I think everything can be turned into a toy. I've never been able to find anything like affordable, but the idea would be you want this as light as possible. I kind of think of this as like object manipulation meets origami. So in theory, if this was light enough and I tossed it in the air, I could pick points and pull and twist, and in theory, it would make shapes. It would basically be like in the air origami. The one thing that I've found that could do this, you can essentially turn this into a ball. Now what you do is you step on each corner of the sheet and you want to throw this part out, and as you throw it out, you want to twist and spin your hands down like this, right? And that's going to make a cylinder. So right as you start throwing it down and spinning, you want to stand on your heels so that you release your feet from the points. So it ends up looking like this. Now this idea doesn't work well with this sheet because it's so heavy, but if this was something lighter, like 10, 20 times lighter than this, when I do this thing and I lift my feet up, it'll turn into a giant cylinder. And you could throw it up in the air and it would float like a ball. That's just one thing that I think is possible with this concept. Now another fun thing is if you have a sheet and you go to a flow jam or a juggling get together and you throw a sheet into the mix, I swear this turns everyone into 3-year-olds. People will take it from you and jump in it. They'll use it as a cape. So in my experience, whenever you take a sheet to a juggling jam, it has this way of awakening people's innocence, and I swear it turns everyone into children. The reason why I call it a dragon is because of the sounds it makes while you flap it around, and it kind of looks like a dragon flying in the air. But yeah, this is just, I just really like playing with stuff, so a bed sheet's an actually pretty cool toy if you have an open mind towards it.
I only got him with things that he has no reason to practice. Why would he do that?
basic contact staffed. Sitting here in the sunny beaches of California. Not quite on the beach though today. So, basics. First thing we'd want to work on is a weave. If you draw an infinity symbol with your hand, leading with the thumb, this should result in a weave. The drill with a weave is to go from front plane, tucking in the sides, to side plane. This is the first way you're going to learn to transition between planes. Front plane, side plane. Always practice it with both hands. We'll skip that for this video. Going to the reverse weave. This time we're leading with the pinky side, carving the air like you're karate chopping. Gonna keep this clean and not make inappropriate jokes here. So with that in mind, grab that, leading with the pinky. Should be the same. People often find it quite challenging on the outside here. You see that it picks away from the contact point. Learning to flip your wrist and keep it smooth is key. So let's do it smooth. Always watching out for this point here. So if you can weave forward and you can weave backward, the idea would be to blend it with the propeller. So this is done in 3 steps. I tend to start it out like this. Gets people a little glitchy. They're not happy with this thumb thing going on over here, but it's important to get comfortable with that. Start out by releasing, turning it up, grabbing it thumb down, important, thumb down here, flipping it to the outside. Now you'll see that I've got a pretty strong level plane here. You might find it dipping one way or the other. That's fine when you're practicing. And then you're going to let it roll off this thumb, catching it back to our starting point. So I'll do it again, a couple steps. Number 1, number 2, thumb down. Number 3, roll it over. Couple more to get that nice and smooth. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. So why learn these 3 things first? It wasn't very entertaining, I'm sure. So the key is that with the propeller and a weave, you should be able to practice something a bit practical. Now notice what I'm doing here with flicking it over. If you keep your wrist loose, you can mess the weave. So instead of a solid forward motion, you can stop and it'll overcook. This, I would say, is a good way to change the direction of the staff if you wanted to practice a particular movement. So you can tip it that way, stall, tip it that way, stall, back into our reverse weaves. So those are the basics. Front weave, back weave, propeller. Blap, blap, blap. If you can weave it quite sensibly, so let's get a normal weave on the go. At the outside points of the weave, you can take a step into a 180. I'll watch my feet as we do this. So you can see here, I just rotate. Weaves are great for the initial, how do you continuously flow by just using your body. And as you weave, drifting between planes. But I think that's a more stylized thing. Most people have shown initially how to do this. They seem to benefit from locking their feet into a known position. I come from a skateboarding background, so I'm pretty happy to be loose on my feet and changing into a pivot style. Has beauty in itself.
So this is the end of the first episode of Play Theory, and this is the section where I want to explain further about the community feedback. What I want this show to be about is about toys and object manipulation. I also want the viewers to give me feedback and ideas of what to do next. So everything you've just seen was my doing. Whatever ideas you have, I want them to be cultivated in the comment section of this video, and I will look and read over all the suggestions and try to add them in episode 2. Of course, I'll still be throwing in my own segments and my ideas. Now, this particular video took me several months to make, so I don't know how frequent these will be, but I don't want them to go past 30 minutes or so. I really want to hear from you guys. What do you want to see more of? What would you like me to go over? So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you liked the idea. If you didn't enjoy it, then tell me what I should do in the next one. How should I make Play Theory a better show? What do you want to see in the next episode? Let me know. This is what I need